Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch Podcast. That is, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch Podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with Alicia Finley and Kate O'Dell. We're talking about the big tax debate going on in 2025. Actually, it's not such a big debate because neither candidate's really talking about it. But I think we'll see in the debate on Thursday that Joe Biden is going to say, I'm not going to raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000. That's what he has been saying since 2020, notwithstanding the fact that $400,000 now, thanks to Biden's inflation, isn't worth what it used to be. So that's helping the administration on its tax policy raise more revenue if that's his threshold. The other thing is, Alicia, what would the Republicans do? Let's assume they win the House and the Senate and the White House. Through something called reconciliation, you only need 51 votes in the Senate. They could pass a revenue and spending bill, but how would they finance the tax extensions from the 2017 bill if they don't raise other taxes?
Well, I think in one way you could eliminate or repeal much of the Inflation Reduction Act's spending and tax credits. And the benefit of the fact that the Congressional Budget Office grossly underestimated how much the cost, and it has actually increased the estimates quite significantly.
What are they now?
I believe that it's around $800 billion compared to $400 in the University of Pennsylvania Penn Wharton model, as well as there was a Goldman Sachs projection that estimated it to be more than $1 trillion. And so I think you're going to continue to see these estimates grow as it tends to occur. So you could get a sizable amount of revenue to help pay for it through that. You could also dynamically score. Dynamically scoring is considering the growth effects of the tax cuts. And that's what helped actually offset about, I think Kate may recall better, about $500 billion of the 2017 reforms. I think the CBO estimated extending all of them would be about $3.6 trillion. But again, Democrats support actually the bulk's extending most of them, and that's actually for the middle class.
Assuming they don't do the
war
and
exactly.
Hostage taking for those tax cuts.
Exactly. And I think actually repealing just a lot of the Biden rules, if you were to actually go back and repeal some of his loan forgiveness plans, and as the cost of those, which is increasing, you could probably actually just get $1 trillion in savings right there.
So there really is changes to be had without raising other taxes. It's by removing some of the spending via the tax code, which is represented by the subsidies for green energy, and then also student loan write-offs and whatnot. Kate, realistically, for the Republicans to be able to extend the Trump tax cuts, they would have to sweep the House and the Senate and the White House. If the Democrats can, certainly if they control the White House, but even if they control just one House of Congress, House or the Senate, they'll be able to leverage that to a very significant tax increase. What do you think?
Well, I think that's right. I think they would have to really run the table to get some of their priorities through. And even then, like we're talking about, we have reason to be nervous about what those might be. I do think there is a risk here of a narrowly divided outcome, given where some of the agreements are. I mean, one of the things that we're talking about earlier was the child tax credit. Costs about $1 trillion over 10 years. The Democrats want to turn that into a universal basic income. They want to make it $3,600 for children under 6. It's about $2,000 now, and it snaps back to $1,000 when the tax cuts expire. And one reason Democrats really like that provision is, well, first of all, because it helps them expand the welfare state and send people who don't pay any income taxes checks the same way other benefit programs too. But the second reason is because it makes their tax increases in other places more palatable to some of their suburban voters by giving these huge write-offs for people who have children under 18. So they use it to kind of goose what we call the distribution tables of the tax changes they want to make. And that is something I think is worth watching for, is that you get sort of a narrow agreement between Republicans and Democrats that maybe staves off some of the worst impulses of the Democrats, but does not make the tax code any better and undoes some of the progress from 2017. And that'll be especially true. A real test for Republicans is whether they can hold on to the corporate rate, which was made permanent under the 2017 tax law for a reason, because that was necessary to get companies to bring capital back to the United States, and they don't make changes on long-term investment decisions based on a tax cut that's only going to last a few years. But there will be all this pressure to reopen that, to go back to 21, 23, 25. So I think that's just going to be a huge test of their principles. And I can't say I'm seeing a lot of resolve there so far on the Republican side. But I do think you could get a mess here on a narrowly divided basis.
Chip Roy, the Texas Republican fire breather, says he's perfectly willing to consider a 25% the corporate tax rate, Alicia, an increase, because he doesn't think Republicans should do any favors for corporations. This is what he's been quoted as saying. I saw today in Politico that he thinks that he wants corporations to do more for the country as opposed to their bottom lines, which is, as economics goes, right up there with Elizabeth Warren economics, because, corporations don't pay the corporate tax rate, right? It's passed along to most of all workers, but also consumers and shareholders, in some combination of those. And the economic literature suggests workers actually pay it. So if you raise that, Mr. Roy, to 25%, the corporations are just going to pass that through. Now, it'll lead to more inefficiencies, as you pointed out, Alicia. It'll lead to corporations trying to look for other loopholes with investment to reduce their overall tax liability. But the idea that you are helping workers by raising the corporate tax rate is the kind of economic nonsense that I guess we have to keep learning the lessons of economics over and over again, because we get these. Chip Roy used to work for Phil Gramm, of all people. So you would have thought he would have learned something there, but apparently not.
Right. Well, I think Republicans are in the wilderness here. And I think part of the problem is that there's this animus toward big business, in part fomented because of the culture wars and where some companies have come out on some of the issues, Disney, big tech, and such. And Republicans seem to separate the issues, the culture, and the economics. So they're kind of blurring together. And so they just want to, I think this is where Marco Rubio is coming from, is that he just wants to kick it or kick big business and say that he's standing up for the working class. But of course, the working class or the workers actually pay this. And there was a National Bureau of Economic Research study that found that the 2017 corporate tax cuts actually lifted the wages of workers, and as a result, actually increased revenue that way.
Well, it'll be interesting to see during the debate on Thursday between Joe Biden and Donald Trump how the tax issue cuts. I think you can expect Joe Biden to repeat Trump wants to raise taxes for the wealthy, and Biden won't raise taxes on anybody making more than $400,000. There's an opening there for Trump. What's going to happen in 2025 if he can talk about Biden's tax increases? We'll see if he has it in him. All right. Thank you, Kate. And thank you, Alicia. And thank you all for listening. We're here every day on Potomac Watch. And please join us, especially the rest of this week, when we have big Supreme Court cases coming up, as well as that debate on Thursday. Thanks for listening.